Washington bears responsibility for consequences. That's the quote from Iran's Revolutionary Guard as Iran says it's carried out an attack on American airbase in the last few hours in retaliation for earlier overnight US strikes on the country's south. Iran saying it targeted the base in Kuwait, which said it was responding to missile and drone attacks. That after earlier in the night, the US targeted a military site in Bandar Abbas, as well as shooting down several Iranian drones. All that as Donald Trump says the US is still not happy with Iran's latest proposals for peace.
Iran is very much intent. They want very much to make a deal. So far, they haven't gotten there. We're not satisfied with it, but we will be. We will be either that or we'll have to just finish the job. But their Navy is gone, as I've said 1,000 times. Their Navy is gone. Their Air Force is gone. Everything's gone, and they're negotiating on fumes.
Well, our international affairs editor, Kethevane Gorjestani, is with me here on set now. Kethevane, just tell us what the latest is that we know about this round of strikes on both sides.
Well, really, it looks like the most serious escalation in violence in the area since the start of the ceasefire back in April. And this incident seemed to have started basically when the Iranian forces fired at some of those ships that were trying to get through the Strait of Hormuz. We're talking about possibly 4 ships, including at least one that had some links to the United States. And that seemingly is what set off this round of tit-for-tat strikes. When these Iranian forces struck those or tried to strike those boats, you then had the United States that said that it launched strikes in order to hit the drones that were posing a threat to the Strait of Hormuz. They say they shut down 4 drones, and then they also struck a drone control station near the southern port of Bandar Abbas, where a 5th drone was about to be launched, according to the Americans. The U.S. Central Command calling these actions by the U.S. military, quote, measured, purely defensive, and intended to maintain the ceasefire. The Iranians didn't see it that way, obviously, and say that they, in response, targeted what they called the American base that served as the source of the attack. Now, there hasn't been any confirmation by the United States that a U.S. base in the region has been hit, and the Iranians did not specify what U.S. base they actually tried to strike. But what we know is that Kuwait said and confirmed that they had come under enemy fire, what they called enemy fire. And we know that the Americans do have several bases in Kuwait, but so far no confirmation there. And this is just the second time that you're seeing these sort of clashes. Earlier this week, the Americans confirming that they had struck several Iranian missile sites and mine-laying boats. Again, there, the Americans saying that these were defensive actions to protect U.S. troops from threats posed by Iran. The problem is that you're seeing these sort of small strikes, tit-for-tat strikes, and the worry is, can this escalate and completely derail the ceasefire? And what does that do also in the midst of possible diplomatic talks between the U.S. and Iran?
Yeah, you mentioned those diplomatic talks. We heard from Donald Trump at the top there. I mean, where do those talks or lack of talks stand now?
Look, it seems that the talks are technically ongoing, that there's still exchanges of proposals and positions between the two sides, but it doesn't look like the two sides are any closer. The United States and Iran keep sort of contradicting each other. One side will come out and say, we seem to have an agreement on, for example, lifting the U.S. sanctions on Iran. And then you have the other side coming out a couple of hours later and saying, absolutely not, we don't have an agreement on that. It's the same thing when it comes to the control of Hormuz. It's the same thing when it comes to Iran's nuclear program. So you have this sort of public sort of war of words. And then you have also Donald Trump himself contradicting what he himself has said about where these talks are ongoing. And during that cabinet meeting, he said everything from the Iranians are negotiating on fumes, but also that they're begging for a deal, that they really want to have a deal, that they're so much in disrepair, if you will, their military, that they are going to get to a deal, but also that the Americans are waiting because they're not really agreeing to what the Iranians are proposing. So it's hard to know exactly where things stand. What Donald Trump also said very clearly is that he's in no rush to get to a deal, even though we have been in this war for 3 months now. He seemed to suggest that the Iranians believe that they can outweight me because there are the upcoming midterms. His answer to that was, I don't care about the midterms. Now, he may not care about the midterms, but the Republican politicians in the House and the Senate who are up for re-election, they probably care a little bit about what is going on with the war in Iran because of the consequences it has on the U.S. economy, especially on gas prices. And that's one side of the pressure, but he's also, Donald Trump, getting some pushback from some of the foreign policy hogs, the people who are supportive of the war in Iran, people like Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator Ted Cruz, those people who are staunch allies of Donald Trump, who have come out very publicly to say, if the deal that we've heard the outlines of between the U.S. and Iran is true, this would be a, quote, disaster. This is a very stark rebuke coming from these people specifically. And so what you're seeing there is that Donald Trump is basically between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, those who want him to, quote unquote, finish the job when it comes to Iran, those foreign policy hawks. And on the other side, those who see that a lot of people in the United States, including Trump voters, are not too happy with the war, or at least with the consequences of the war, with those gas prices. And Donald Trump is going to have to reconcile those two elements. And that's why it's hard for him. Does he go for a deal, even if it's not a great deal? Or does he drag this on to defeat Iran, if that is indeed possible?
Kethevane, thanks very much. Kethevane Gorjestani, our international affairs editor there.